It is 2 a.m. in Caracas. While most of the city sleeps, the silence of the Venezuelan night is shattered by the roar of 150 U.S. aircraft screaming across the northern coast. Within minutes, the lights of the capital go dark, not from a local power failure, but by design. A few hours later, a photograph appears on social media that feels like it was ripped from a Cold War fever dream. It shows Nicolás Maduro, the man who has ruled Venezuela for over a decade, blindfolded on the deck of a U.S. warship. He's wearing a gray fleece and noise-canceling headphones. He isn't a president anymore. He's a high-value detainee headed for a federal courtroom in Manhattan. This isn't just a law enforcement action, and it isn't just about the $50 million bounty on his head. To understand why the U.S. just executed the most brazen military intervention in Latin America in nearly 40 years, we have to look past the narco-terrorism indictments. We have to look at the math that kept Maduro's regime alive while his people starved, and the exact moment Washington decided that math no longer added up. For years, Maduro turned Venezuela into a massive, state-sponsored financial bypass. The system worked through three distinct valves: a shadow fleet of ghost tankers selling oil off the grid, a gold bypass that swapped jungle-mined gold for hard currency in Turkey and Iran, and the cartel of the Suns, which allegedly turned the military into a cocaine logistics hub. This was the secret reason for the timing. It wasn't that Maduro was becoming more of a dictator. He'd been that for years. It was that the survival economy he'd built was starting to export its chaos, creating a parallel financial system immune to the U.S. dollar. Washington didn't just want to stop a tyrant. They wanted to dismantle a machine that proved you could survive entirely outside the American-led global order. But there is a deeper math at play here, one that explains why the U.S. moved now in early 2026 rather than 3 years ago. It's called the petro-stability ratio. For decades, the unspoken deal in the global economy was simple. The U.S. provides the world's reserve currency, and in exchange, the world prices its most valuable commodity, oil, in dollars. This gives Washington an incredible superpower. If a country misbehaves, the U.S. can simply turn off their access to dollars, effectively starving their economy. This is what was supposed to happen to Venezuela. But by late 2025, the math shifted. Maduro wasn't just surviving, he was beta testing a blueprint for every other sanctioned nation on Earth. Venezuela began settling oil contracts in a basket of non-Western currencies and digital assets that bypassed the New York clearinghouses entirely. For the U.S. Treasury, this wasn't just a leak in the boat, it was a hole in the hull of the entire global financial ship. If Venezuela, a country with the world's largest proven oil reserves, successfully decoupled from the dollar, it would provide a proof of concept for much larger players. The secret reason for the capture was to prevent a contagion of de-dollarization. The U.S. realized that sanctions only work if the target has no other choice. By building a functional, albeit criminal, alternative, Maduro had become a systemic risk to the dollar's dominance. The indictments for drug trafficking provided the legal cover, but the financial defiance provided the urgency. Washington decided it was cheaper to launch a high-stakes extraction mission than to allow the precedent of a dollar-free oil state to take root in the Western Hemisphere. The message was clear. You can be a dictator, but you cannot be a competitor to the greenback. The irony of this intervention is that while the U.S. successfully removed the man, they haven't yet dismantled the map he left behind. By capturing Maduro, the U.S. has effectively decapitated the survival economy, But they've also inadvertently validated the fears of every other nation currently on the U.S. sanctions list. Across the globe, the reaction hasn't been one of relief, but of accelerated hedging. If a sovereign leader can be snatched from his capital because his financial math threatened the dollar, then no central bank is truly safe. We are now entering a period of financial fortress building. Nations are watching the footage of the USS Iwo Jima and coming to a singular, dangerous conclusion. The only way to protect your sovereignty is to ensure your economy is completely invisible to the American eye. The hype suggests this is the return of the Monroe Doctrine, a sheriff restoring order to its backyard. The reality is far more fragile. By using such extreme force to protect the dollar's status, the U.S. may have signaled that the currency's dominance can no longer be maintained through trade and trust alone, but requires a kinetic backup. As Maduro awaits trial in a high-security cell in New York, the ghost fleet he built is still at sea. The gold routes he carved through the jungle are still being walked, and the basket of currencies he championed is being studied by economists from Moscow to Beijing. The capture of Nicolás Maduro wasn't the end of a regime, it was the opening shot of a new kind of currency war. One where the stakes are no longer just interest rates and trade deficits, but the very definition of national borders. The U.S. proved it can capture a president, but can it capture the idea he represented? If the world decides that the dollar is a weapon rather than a tool, then the most expensive mission in modern Latin American history might actually have accelerated the very collapse it was designed to prevent.